is. Thank you for being here, and thanks to those who joined our last meeting. It's great to see you and have some newcomers. We have a great list of registrants today and a lot of exciting speakers. And we're gathered here today to organize the green sector in New York City and to align workforce agencies that are delivering green jobs training and employers and policymakers that are focused on the growing green job sector. I'd like to take a minute to point your attention to the public participant agenda, where you can follow along and use the breakout tables to fill in responses. And I'd also like to take a moment to highlight our meeting, the intended results for this meeting that you could see on the participant agenda. I'm not going to read through them since you have them there on your agenda and you've seen them on the screen while I'm talking. But let's go to the next slide. And I want to point out that on our agenda, we have some really great presenters here today. There's going to be a labor market insights presentation from nationally recognized experts, Dr. Christine Chamora and Dr. Brian Shelley. And we'll have some time to ask them questions. They're going to be sharing a lot of amazing data. And then we have some presentations after that conversation from Climate Jobs New York and from the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development. And we'll introduce those folks to you a little bit later on. And of course, you know, there's going to be time throughout for you to ask questions. So use the chat, like Diana said, to post any questions, and we'll try do our best to get them to the folks presenting or answer things right into the chat. So yeah, we're going to move on to the icebreaker. You were right, Roman, in switching the slide. So we're going to break you into small groups. And on the participant agenda, I pre-populated whoever has registered. So if you didn't register by this morning, your name might not be on there, but there's rows for you to add it. So you'll see a table with 4 columns, your name and or pre-populated or blank for you to fill it in. And then in the last column, thinking about networking opportunities and making connections, we want you to fill in the blank of ask me about blank and think about something that you could be a resource for. And you'll fill that in on the table there and then discuss with your small group. So someone on our team, you'll get an invitation now to breakout groups and just accept that and we'll see you in 5 minutes.
Sorry, Karen.
Yeah, Jessica needs to be a host, not a co-host, and only you have that power. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Let me make you a host. Let's get some quick volunteers to share something interesting they heard. Just unmute yourself, and if you heard something really interesting that could be a resource to you or to all of us in this room, you could speak on behalf of yourself or someone else who is in the room. Don't make me voluntold you.
I learned a lot about meditation from Michael DeVito. So talk to him about that if you're interested.
Awesome. Can we get one more? Come on, don't be shy.
Well, I learned that that NEW can send some representatives to some of our classes, especially our excited for we have one that's all young women's cohort, so they can send some women in the trades for our students to connect with. So that's really exciting.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. One more.
Hi, this is Jeannie. Diane Gonzalez shared some trainings that are useful.
And Diane Gonzalez is with?
Association for Energy Affordability.
Yes, okay. All right, thank you. Thanks everyone. I hope that you got a little bit of midday energy from meeting new people and seeing new faces. And I'm going to ask Roman on my team to start the presentation. And I'm going to take a little bit of time to tell you about Jobs First and our partnership development process that you are all engaging in with us now. So with that said, oops, my system's signing out. Sorry, hold on. Okay. Sorry, give me one moment. I just got kicked out of Google. Perfect timing. Okay, let me pull up my presentation here. It's just a perfect day that I'm having some work done in my house and it keeps knocking out my Wi-Fi. So timing is everything, and thank you for your patience. Okay, so Jobs First, for those of you who don't know us, we are an intermediary and we do work at the intersection of workforce and economic development systems. This includes education, training providers, public and private sectors, and philanthropy. And we are connecting and aligning ideas, policies, investments, and most importantly, promising and effective practice in the workforce development field. And in transforming systems, Jobs First brings together all available resources. We do this in order to connect young adults to the economic life of New York City. And while the economic success of a young adult is determined by so many things, we believe that solutions should be sourced from diverse perspectives and experiences. And that's why it's so important that all of you are here and involved. Next slide, please. We center our work around a repeatable and credibility building process. And given the nature of our work, the solutions that we are working on never look the same. It's our process that has been built and refined over the last 15 years that remains consistent. And this allows us to achieve measurable impact. But what the end result looks like is really up to those folks in the room and in the process with us. Next slide, please. So our 5 I's, this is our process. And you see laid out here, we start with investigating, and that's where we are with you. We listen and learn first, and we do this to identify the existing challenges. Next, we imagine, and we bring communities and stakeholders together and continue that process with you. And together we imagine new and improved solutions, like some of the work those who are on our last meeting heard about, some of the partnerships that we've launched. Next, we incubate. We work together to evolve ideas into a tangible plan that advances our change process. And then we implement, we launch, and continuously refine new ways of working together. And we support the implementation of new practices, programs, and partnerships. And then we integrate. And what integration looks like is evaluating performance, and we assess what's next and advance what works, evaluating the broader impacts of the model that we launched together. And we share insights with the field to inform future solutions. Previous slide, please. So where are we now? We are investigating. And I just want to highlight some of the key activities which will sound familiar to what we are doing together. Convening you and working on a problem definition, conducting baseline data analysis like the labor market information that you'll hear today, market demands, the economic opportunities we've been learning about together. And in our next session, we'll spend some time assessing programs and policies and what are the needs, what are the resource needs, and what are the assets that we have together as a group, and identify opportunities for greater coordination while conducting continuous research and analysis. Next slide. So this is what a roadmap of this process could look like. We've laid out some of the steps that we've been engaging in, we will engage in. And it's really important to note that our process is supported by our approach and our core values. Next slide. So the process that we laid out and the roadmap that you see throughout that, it is supported by these core values. And that's Jobs First working across systems. And we're community and people centered. This process is community and people centered, and it relies on partnership. Those are our core values. Next slide, please. Our solutions and our unique value, it lies in our ability to influence systems change, build sustainable, successful collaborations, and our ability to find solutions that are scalable and replicable. And like I said, everything that we do is through partnership. As an intermediary, we rely on all of you to build these solutions and make the effective change that's needed. We've found that designing and launching large-scale solutions, working together, it's the soundest, most effective way to a more just system. And no two solutions look the same. Next slide, please. So Jobs First Impact Framework, and this begins with partners committing to the inclusive change that we're working toward and an inclusive change process. And it continues with the development of the new solutions that lead to tangible outcomes for young adults, for their communities, for our partners who serve them. And it's through the scale of proven practice and policies across the system. For each of our solutions, we track and measure the impact of our work across 4 levels: people, institutions, partnerships, and the system. And what we ask of you in this process and what we need from you as a participant is, you know, in the very kind of tangible way is to be here, to be present, to participate. You know, we're used to doing this process in person, and that's why we ask you to have your video on and to be open to conversation and discussion throughout these meetings. And it's, you know, if you can't be here, if there's someone else at your agency that should be here, we invite you to delegate them. And we want you to also think about what it means to be at the table, to participate with intention and transparency, and deliver on commitments that we make together. And ultimately, you are collectively the owners of the outcome. And so before we move on, I just want you to think about your experiences in partnership. We're going to discuss this later in the breakout session, but think about what I laid out here in this process and maybe prior partnership experiences that you've had. And we're going to ask you to discuss that and think about what could be missing here. And just thank you for being here. Before we move on to the presentation, we do have a quick poll that I want our presenters to know who's in the room and all of us to know who's in the room. So I'm going to ask my team, Jesse, to launch that poll. And you let us know what you're here representing: a CBO, a training provider, if you're a student or a graduate.
Hi, Carrie. Sorry, I messaged you and texted you, but there's no poll set up, so I can't launch anything. So if people could just use the chat, that would be great. Sorry about that. There's just nothing here for me to launch. So.
Oh, it was set up in the meeting on the back end. Sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, we could put it in the chat. So I'll read out the choices again. Are you here representing, well, you could just tell us, but what we listed was a CBO, training provider, a student or graduate of a training, a government agency, philanthropy, another intermediary, or something else. Okay, and while you're filling that in, let me take a moment to introduce our next presenters, Dr. Christine Shimura, who is CEO and Chief Economist, and Dr. Brian Shelley, Senior Strategist for Talent and Education. Both Shimura from Chamorro Economics and Analytics. And Roman, if you could turn the screen share over to Chamorro.
There you go. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
I seem to have some echoing here. Let me.
I think you'll either have to turn the mic off on your computer or your phone, one of the two.
I turned it off on the phone. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
All right. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, I can't hear you, but I'm going to just go on. All right. Okay, so thank you for having us here today. First of all, just some background. Of course, you all have your working team that have been working on a definition sector of green economy. And I just want to congratulate you on that and applaud you because you've done a great job in identifying some green workers or green occupations in a way similar to what the Bureau of Labor Statistics has done. And I'll bring that back going forward or in some slides coming up. But first of all, just as you did, the BLS identified green occupations based on the output. So what is being produced by someone, and that's considered a green. And so at the very top, energy efficiency, when we're using solar, for example, that would be considered green. And then there's the second way that BLS is looking at green occupations, which is becoming more prevalent, being used by others, and that is occupational greening. That is, what's the impact of the green economy on the occupations themselves? So in this case, because we're needing to retrofit buildings, so an example of occupation greening would be, because we're retrofitting buildings, we're going to see that some of the carpenters are green jobs. HVAC is green jobs because they're retrofitting buildings. So again, we've got two ways. We're looking at green jobs because of the output from it. And under that definition, recycling compost, what we're producing from that occupation is green compost. And then secondly, occupational greening, because we're seeing impact of green on all occupations, things like computer operations or mechanics would fall under being green. And hopefully that will become more apparent as we go through this example. But before we define green more specifically, we need to think about how we can track it over time. And so as economists, we typically talk about industries. So I'm going to use utilities as an example. So the utilities industry, not all of the sub-industries within utilities are green, but nuclear, solar, biomass would be examples of green industries. And of course, it's important for us to identify these green occupations so that you could track it over time and so that we could see which occupations are in most demand so that you could train people for those occupations. So when we look at utilities, and here we're just looking at New York City proper, not the metropolitan area, you've got about 15,000 jobs in New York City where people work in utilities. And notice it pays very well, 197,000 compared to about 93,000 for the average job in New York City. But when I rank order this by employment, and notice at the top, most of these jobs are in electric utility power distribution. And if we look at those that would be considered green, we've only got 5, nuclear, solar, wind, hydro, and biomass. So what do those 5, what does employment look like in those 5 industries if we track it over time? So again, just using utilities as an example right now, and green utilities, here you're looking at employment. The gray shaded areas are recessions. So looking at the total employment for those green jobs or green utility type jobs, here you can see that it was up around 225 or so It fell off during the recession, and now it's back up to about 200. This is interesting to me that even though the current administration in the White House is not green friendly as some in the past, we've still seen some significant growth in green utilities, which says to me that there's a lot of momentum in terms of job growth for the future. Solar utilities. Now, just looking at employment using solar to generate electricity. Notice this is a new industry. It was very low back in 2002 through about 2010 when it started to pick up, but we're still looking at just about 50 employees or so. Wind power generation similarly fell off and was quite low during much of the decade, and now has picked up to about 25. So that is just using one example of one industry and how the employment is growing in those green utilities. But we need, especially for you, to identify the occupations and the skills and the credentials of those people who are in demand in the green industry. So what I did is I took those 5 green utility industries and I looked at all the occupations within them. And so here you see some security guards are at the top, nuclear power operators, some that only require a high school degree, for example, electricians, first line supervisors. And so this is one way of looking at green occupations within industries. But again, it's more important for you to identify those occupations across all industries that are green, not just utilities. And so similar to what your green committee looked at in terms of identifying the occupations, the BLS has used the same approach. And that's 2 approaches again. What is the output from this occupation that's being delivered? And if it's something that's green, such as wind turbine services, then it's a green job. And the second thing is the occupational greening, which emphasizes again the impact of the green economy having on occupations because of retrofitting carpenters. The BLS has about 820 occupations that they track. 142 of them they say they define as green occupations. 67 of them require a high school diploma or less. And it's interesting, some of the studies that they put out in terms of some of these occupations, you'll look at and say, why is financial analyst considered green? And that's because they have tasks, they have new tasks that they need to perform that they hadn't in the past. And an example there would be doing the financials on retrofitting a building. Or here we have shipping, receiving clerks. The new green task they have is comparing shipping routes or methods to determine which have the least environmental impact. And then I thought you would find this one really interesting. So those of you who are training and development specialists, do you know that you now have a new green task that you didn't have in the past? But with the green economy, you now need to evaluate modes of training delivery, such as in-person or virtual, to optimize training effectiveness, training costs, or environmental impacts. And clearly COVID has thrown us into the era that we're now thinking very hard about the environmental impacts and doing training virtually that we didn't think about previous to that. So on this slide, I'm showing you the 67 green occupations that BLS has identified that require a high school diploma or less. And I've highlighted in blue those that I believe are a crossover into what you have already identified in your working group. So you guys have done a great job in identifying those green occupations. Some of these others, I think maybe you haven't highlighted because manufacturing is not as big here. Like for example, chemical equipment operators and tenders is not highlighted in blue toward the bottom of the first column. And again, that could be because you don't have many chemical plants here in New York City, if any. So we're going to now switch gears. Let me give you some background before turning this over to Brian. We have a software called Jobs EQ, and in it we have job postings, or we spider hundreds, thousands of sites every day, and then we deduplicate them. We look at the job postings, and we can look at it by different groups. So we created a group called green occupations, and that's basically these 142 occupations that the BLS identified. And when we pull the job postings, we save the entire job description so that we can query different words. So with these 142 occupations, we ran our job postings and queried those that require a high school degree or less. And so with that, I'm going to turn this over to Brian to show you some trends and some of what we're seeing through our JobsEQ job postings. Brian?
Brian, you're muted.
And now I'm not. It is a given that pretty much any meeting that I start, I will start talking on mute. I'm sure no one else has that experience. So are you seeing, you're seeing my slides right now, yes? Okay, great. So let's talk about within these 142 green occupations that Chris described, what are the trends that we see? Well, the first that we see is she's already alluded to. In New York City, we have seen a great growth in the region in green jobs in New York City, right? You can see that this is indexed to 100 based on 2009. So basically that's 100, we're talking in terms of percentages of 2009 jobs. And what you see here is a steady growth, which is all the more doubly impressive because around 2016, we had a administration that no longer prioritized the growth of green jobs. And you see steady growth to the point where before this latest recession, green jobs were had grown to about 120% of where they were in 2009, lagging behind the rest of the economy. The rest of the job growth, which was up closer to 130. But, you know, you're seeing probably like a 6-7 point gap there. That's not bad for an emerging industry with limited government support during this times. And so what, and clearly the current recession has impacted us, and we'll talk about how that has mattered here in a second. What you'll see here is we have as part of JobsEQ, we have our tool called RTI, which stands for Real-Time Intelligence. It pulls together job postings from about 30,000 different sites and aggregates them so that we can analyze different trends in job postings all across the United States, and in this case in particular, New York City. And so what you can see, the trends for green jobs, this blue line right here represents November to November 2019 to 2020. This gray line represents November to November 2018 to 2019. So comparing years basically. And what you'll see here was that green job postings were about the same in late 2018, 2019, as they were in late 2019, 2020. Then, of course, the world fell apart. And as part of that, we saw a lot fewer job postings in green jobs, but also in other jobs. This is not unique to the green sector. So, and what you've started to see here is as we have recovered, and we do believe at Chimera that we are in an economic recovery, even if it's proceeding slower than we all think, right? The green job postings have rebounded again. People are starting to hire again for these green jobs. What green jobs are they hiring for, particularly when they have a high school diploma or equivalent? Well, you can see right here, right? And this brings us back to an important part that Chris talked about. Some of these jobs are pretty old school, right? Like these are not new jobs that we have come up with, but they're new jobs that are being done maybe in a new way, a way that's affected by greening. You know, green companies and green organizations need customer service representatives. Everybody needs maintenance and repair workers, right? And you can see that the wages here are, you know, some of these are a little low for living in New York City, I know, right? But there are jobs out there that are available that we consider and that Bureau of Labor Statistics considers green jobs. And what we also want to show you is who's hiring for these green jobs. Who is hiring right now? There are two big groups or two big organizations. One is the City of New York. Over the past year, they have hired almost 500 people in green occupations. And the other is Amazon. Amazon has hired, when you take sort of Amazon workforce staffing here and Amazon a little bit further down here, 99, they've been hiring almost as much as New York City, so that they are hiring these green occupations too. And now this is the past year, right? If we just look at the last 30 days, which is something I know that you guys requested, what you'll see is that Amazon has been hiring for a lot of positions, right? So we've seen 524 total job ads in the last month for jobs that BLS and we consider be green jobs. And then that's not even if you bring in checking the chat to see if I'm at my timer. Nope, I'm not at my time yet. Amazon has Amazon Services LLC, Amazon Web Services. There's Amazon down here. So they have a lot of job postings for green jobs. You see New York City falling off in the last 30 days. That's such a small sample size, right, that I really don't make anything of it. Could it be because the normal hiring cycle for city government is just not happening right now? It's going to happen in December or the beginning of the year, maybe. Could we be seeing the effect of budget cuts due to COVID? Yeah, we could, but not much that we can tell from a year's worth of data. And so if we go forward and look at what are the certifications, right? And I think this is really important for the group that you're most concerned about, which is people with high school degrees or less. What are the certifications that they can get that increase their likelihood of getting a green job? Another way to say this, right, is what are the organizations who are posting green jobs asking for? What certifications are they asking for? Well, I'll tell you, when you run a general search, driver's licenses always show up first, so that's not any big surprise, right? But look at this, EPA Section 608 certification, OSHA 30, right? I think that, CPR is always a good one for both green and non-green occupations. These are the kinds of things that a student with a high school degree, or perhaps even without, I'm not familiar with all of these, but that they can get certifications in these areas immediately and in less than a 2-year program, in something like a certificate program that may last, a number of months. But these are things that may help people get these jobs right now, and are probably particularly valued for students with a high school degree or less. And you also see sort of JobsEQ can also tell us what are the hard skills and soft skills that employers offering green jobs look for. I will tell you that you will always see Microsoft Office near the top of this list. You will almost always see Microsoft Excel. Plumbing's an interesting one, HVAC systems. And then you get down into soft skills here. And I will tell you, soft skills, whether you're in green jobs or non-green jobs, always end up being, talk about very similar things. Every job wants someone who can communicate well, both verbally and in writing. Want a cooperative team player, somebody who has ideal customer service, all of those things. So that's my Slack. That is what is happening in our RTI engine. But let's look a little bit more specifically at 67 BLS green occupations that require a high school diploma or less. So again, really the people that Jobs First NYC and a lot of your organizations work with most closely. How do we get them jobs? What kinds of things do they need? Time for Q&A. All right, we will, so that's what we call a teaser. If you want to see more of that information, please ask more in the Q&A, but we will turn it over to Carrie to facilitate that.
Well, Brian, but I know what you've put together, I'm sure people will want to see. I just am flagging, is there a way for you to kind of skim through it so that we have the information that they might want to ask questions about?
Yes, let me see if I can give a 2-sentence description of each one of these slides. Green jobs are growing for those with a high school diploma or less, but not as fast as green jobs in New York City are growing in general. Okay. You can see here the top 20 green occupations requiring a high school degree or less and paying $70,000. Again, a lot of old school occupations here, carpenters, electricians, great jobs that are being repurposed into green jobs. Oh, okay. Entry points for carpenters. These are some of the jobs that feed most directly into the carpenter occupation. And this is something we can do for any type of different job. You want to know, like, if I'm a construction laborer, can I become a carpenter? Yeah, there's a very high probability, relatively speaking, that you can make the transition. Age demographics, green occupations are no younger or older in New York City than the general workforce. Race, there is a racial gap, a disparity between the percentage of Blacks in all occupations versus the percentage in green occupations. And that gap is about 4 points, which is, not as sizable as some other gaps. So we can be thankful for that. But yes, it is. We do see fewer African Americans in green jobs right now, for particularly those with less than a high school degree. Age, they don't skew any younger. I already said that. Summarized that already. And here's some slides. Okay, that's the 60-second version on those slides.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And folks, when you ask questions, feel free to ask to go back to a slide that you saw here that you're interested in digging in. And if Brian had to kind of speed through it. So, and in asking questions, the key is, this is here to prompt your thinking and also for you to say, this is different than my experience on the ground. We saw some things coming up in chat that indicated that. So folks who are weighing in on the chat there and feel like this is missing something, can you unmute yourself and go ahead and ask questions?
So this is Santos Rodriguez, if I'm able to. I'm sorry. Thank you very much for having us. May I, Carrie?
Yep.
Yeah. So I noticed that there was a lot of highlighting of the carpenters, but to understand the green economy on our sector and the building trades union, it goes much greater than that. And I don't know that was just a quick snapshot, but I want to make sure that everyone is mindful that there's a whole entire industry that encompasses, and I'm glad to see that it was shown previously that HVAC and plumbing, it really does cross our sector completely. And then I was interested in also the point of the demographics that you showed. I didn't see highlighted any Latin or Hispanic Latinx on the slide. Is that for any specific reason? I mean, it went by fast, so I might have missed it.
Well, this is Chris. While Brian's getting back to the other slide, yes, thank you for making that point. Of the 820 or so occupations that the BLS tracks, over 100 of them are green, and many of them in the construction sector, this construction industry, are considered green. So yes, we here are just highlighting a couple as examples. And then on this particular slide, we're relying on the Census American Fact Finder Survey, and these are the categories that they provide to us.
And I do see a question. This slide does have Asian included in it. The demographic profiles do have Asians broken down in it.
Brian, there's a couple of people who popped up questions related to Amazon. Can you clarify what examples of green jobs at Amazon are provided by Amazon?
I'm actually going to pass that to Chris.
Okay, so I've got here, I'm flipping through some of the information in terms of what BLS has identified, and warehousing jobs are considered green as well. And one, as an example, that is off the top of my head that I remember reading, was that they have to consider routes. How do I get from point A to point B, and which is the most economical and efficient route, the route that will use the least amount of gasoline? And clearly in New York City, it may be time of day in terms of traffic. So that's one area that comes to mind in terms of how do we route these people. Other things I would think would be just efficiency in terms of mechanics, for example, came up, or machinists. And a new task that would be considered green is making sure that they are testing the machines more frequently to make sure they are running at an optimal speed, making them most efficient. Some of these things seem very practical, but again, if you're interested in this, then I will send this to Carrie so that she can send it on to you. The study, it's a 90-page study. I don't know that anyone wants to read the study, but Appendix D of the study is a bunch of spreadsheets that identify the tasks that are associated with each of these occupations that would be considered green. And I think especially those of you who are a workforce or training providers might find that to be especially useful.
Thank you, Christine. Somebody asked if you can go back, Christine, to an earlier slide on occupational numbers, that the numbers seem very low.
Okay.
There was a question if they were in the thousands, and I think Brian said no.
And remember that we're looking only at New York City, just the city. We're not looking at the metropolitan area. Yes, this is just New York City. If we were looking at the metropolitan area, these numbers would be much, much larger. And again, with solar, I would think that, so these are just people that work in solar electricity generation within the city. So that's why they're so small. And if you flip back up, Brian, maybe a couple slides earlier to show employment overall. Yes, so here, actually that was a good one. So here at the very top, you see almost 12,000 people in the city of New York work at electric power distribution. I would guess it would be, it would be several-fold larger than that if we looked at the whole metropolitan area. The same with nuclear, solar, wind, and I would think too that wind power generation would find more of that out in the suburbs rather than in the city or in rural areas. I hope that helps.
So I just wanted to answer a previous question that we had about Latino, so about percentage of Latinos in these jobs. So in the green jobs, as we have defined them in this presentation, about 26.7% of them look like they go to are being staffed currently by Latinos. We will try to get some version of that into the presentation that we send to all of you, as well as sort of checking my numbers since I just did that on the fly.
Okay, great. And Brian, and Christine, is there a different source we would be pulling from to get those numbers of other populations?
No, we would be, I'm sorry, go ahead, Brian.
No, please.
We would be using the American Fact Finder survey,
Okay,
so census data.
right. And the study that you mentioned, folks are very interested in that. If you could get a link for us to share. We
Sure, I'll
can post that in
send
the
you.
chat as well.
Okay.
Or feel free to post it yourself in the chat. Okay, so we could have an entire session and conversations and raise questions around the data. And I think at a future session of this group of the participants, we will come together to develop a set of questions that this data makes us think about, and to determine, you know, what's missing and what do we need to know in order to build the type of network that we're building. You know, what are the questions that we have to answer and where might we find it, so that we can work with the economists and the analysts to get closer to the set of data, or to build on the set of data. But I want to thank Brian and Christine very much for pulling this information together and being a part of this conversation today. And I'm sure that they'll be interested in hearing the additional questions that we have to get at a set of data that will inform the model.
Thank you, Carrie, for the opportunity. You guys are doing some very important work, and we appreciate it, and we appreciate the opportunity to be able to help.
Great, thank you so much. And I think on your end, if you could stop your screen share. Wonderful, okay. Thank you, and I am going to toss the mic over to Kathleen Culhane from Non-Traditional Employment for Women.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Carrie. Thanks all for being here with us today as we continue this great discussion. The discussion we're going to have now really builds on what we've heard so far this afternoon, so I'm excited about that. So it's my pleasure to just quickly introduce Jeff Bocrat, who is the Executive Director of Climate Jobs New York, along with Santos Rodriguez, who's the Director of Community Affairs and Strategic Initiatives for the Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York, who I work very closely with. And Jeff and Santos, please take it away.
Great, thanks, Kathleen, and thanks, Kathleen and Carrie, for inviting us to be here. I appreciate the chance to talk to everyone who's here, and I appreciate the conversation about data, which is near and dear to my heart, especially since my days at the Labor Department when I worked on a weekly, if not daily basis with the really great people at Bureau of Labor Statistics. The crucial conversation to have. So I want to do just three things in the time I have. One is to give you a little bit of background on what Climate Jobs New York is, how we came to be, what we exist to do, for anybody who's not familiar with us, and share a few thoughts about workforce development, especially in the green economy, and then also talk about how we think about creating opportunity as labor leading on climate. And I'm going to do all that in just a few minutes because I want to be sure there's time for my colleague Santos from the building trades to talk about how this works in practice, promoting access to opportunity, especially in the building trades. So to just start with Climate Jobs New York, our origins really date from after Superstorm Sandy. And after that happened in New York, there was a greater recognition in the labor movement of a few things. Number one, climate change was already affecting union members. It was disproportionately affecting vulnerable communities. Number two, that labor had a lot to bring to the table in terms of driving climate action. And that's especially true politically, but even more broadly than that. And number three, that we wanted to be part of shaping these new industries, renewables, clean energy sectors. As I always say, the jobs that became good family supporting, community sustaining jobs in oil and gas, for example, that wasn't inherent. They became that because they organized. And the same is certainly true here. So after Superstorm Sandy, there was I think a heightened recognition of each of those three each of those three things. So a group of very forward-looking labor leaders got together with Cornell and went through a process of thinking about what's the role that labor should play on climate, and came out with a report that set out an agenda for taking on climate and taking on the crisis of inequality in New York. As I think a lot of people on this in this meeting will know, even before COVID, 40% of Americans couldn't afford a $400 emergency, and which is a striking crisis of inequality to be in, and that extends to New York. So labor got together and said, here's how we can take on climate, here's how we can take on the crisis of inequality. And following that report, they created Climate Jobs New York to bring it to life, to make it real. We are a coalition of labor unions representing more than 2.6 million working New Yorkers. It's a broad group of unions, and we exist to drive bold climate action, to drive investments in renewables, in energy efficiency, and at the same time create good union jobs. And of course, in doing that, we look out for a just transition out of fossil fuels and into a clean economy. We have over the last few years, we've focused on, for example, wind, and driving the unprecedented commitment to procure 9 gigawatts of offshore wind in New York, doubling funding for solar on schools, these sorts of concrete investments in jobs and in taking on climate. So because of time, I'm not going to go too much into our current priorities, except just to flag that one of them, a crucial one, is around building retrofits for energy efficiency and solar power. And that's a really important one here in New York City. It's a very important one in New York State. We can have a huge effect on emissions. Buildings are the greatest source of emissions in New York City. We can also create good jobs and good careers. And crucially, at a moment of economic crisis and when we need an economic recovery, we can do all of that relatively quickly in the building sector. So there are a variety of ways that we are prioritizing building retrofits as how we view the way forward in the next 6 months to a year. And that's, I think, very relative to the conversation we're having today. So I also want to share just a few high-level thoughts about workforce development in the green sector, given the august audience we have here and all of you who focus on this. One is just to emphasize the important role that apprenticeship and labor management training programs can and should play in all of this. They are world-class training programs. They're very closely connected to companies and careers in the sector. There's a great ecosystem of programs around those programs, pre-apprenticeship, for example, and Santos will talk more about that. And so they're a strategically important tool to use as we think about workforce development. Just as a side note, the work that's done under project labor agreements helps to drive that pipeline, because these labor management training programs can easily scale up to meet demand in this quickly growing sector. And it's easier to do that. It's easier to predict the demand for work when the work is done under project labor agreements. So just to emphasize the valuable role that apprenticeship and labor management training can play in workforce development for the green sector. And a second point associated with that is the importance of taking sort of a strategic approach to training journey persons for this sector. So rather than training just for a very targeted skill that's specific to the technology of the moment, we can get a lot more bang for our buck by investing in training journey persons, creating careers that can grow with the technology as it evolves over the next 2 or 3 decades, which it absolutely will. And so that's important for creating good opportunity. It's important for creating careers as opposed to short-term jobs. It's also crucial for the success of the overall enterprise, because we need a skilled workforce that can evolve with technology in the green sector. So those are just a couple of, I think, fundamentally important considerations when we think about workforce development and creating opportunity in green sectors. And so before I turn it over to Santos, I just want to say that overall, access and opportunity in this sector is crucial to how labor is approaching our work in this area. And it's especially important when we're talking about green jobs. I think it's clear to all of us that low-income communities, communities of color, have been hit first and worst by climate change. And as we think about the way forward, addressing climate change, addressing the impacts of pollution, that we ensure that the benefits and economic development associated with that are represented in disadvantaged communities. And so whether it's in our comments on the new clean energy standard, or our participation in the State Just Transition Working Group, and in many other forums, that is front and center in how we think about the way forward here. And you know, as you all probably know, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act from last year makes broad commitments about benefits for disadvantaged communities, and we just need to make sure that that turns into concrete action. So with that, I'll stop talking, and I want to turn it over to Santos, who can talk more about you know, from Sandy Build It Back to the Apprenticeship Readiness Collective to the new Project Labor Agreement with New York City, how promoting access to opportunity works, especially in the building trades. And Santos, take it away.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Kathleen. I know that we only have a few minutes. I'll try to be as quick as possible. My name is Santos Rodriguez. I am a graduate of Construction Skills, the Edward J. Malloy Initiative program. I'm a Brooklynite at heart, born and raised in NYC in Williamsburg housing. So this for me is very personal, to try to give opportunity and create more opportunity for our communities across the board. So the quick example I'll give is Sandy Build It Back. You know, Superstorm Sandy came in and created what it did and left what it left behind for us to build on, right? The city and us partnered up with Sandy to create Sandy Build It Back, the Sandy Build It Back program, and help people from the communities, which Kathleen and you were a part of with Construction Skills and Helmets to Hard Hat, to bring in people from those affected communities and help them. Now, ironically and uniquely, right, those new members that came in don't necessarily have to work in those communities, right? Because if a workforce is there, that's okay. There's an existing workforce, but because those jobs were created, we were able to bring in people and place them within the 5 boroughs of New York City. Some of the locals work in Long Island and Westchester, so they have the ability to go outside of the city and still have that same access and create that program. So the importance to us in seeing this and the value is speaking to the New York City Project Labor Agreement is, you know, a new collective has been formed, right? We know that new has existed with us working side by side. We know that Construction Skills has existed, and so has Helmets to Hard Hat. P2A is the newest program. So we've all spoken and came together to form the ARC Collective, the Apprenticeship Readiness Collective, right? Because it's not about working separately, but working together, because one shoe doesn't fit all, right? And sharing those resources to help the entry points be a little bit more easier for folks to come in from the community. So Construction Skills services a lot of high school students, but we do service an adult population. New services, new, right? And non-traditional employment for women. Helmets to Hard Hat services veterans coming in with honorable discharges and helps them get into the program. And now P2A services an adult population and a justice involved population as well, which at the same time we all do. We don't discriminate against anyone that's been justice involved. And I think this is the one opportunity or career path that we really don't care. If you're able to do the work, we want you, right? And that's it. This is for some a last chance, but it's an important chance, right? So when we speak about the green economy and we speak about the New York City Project Labor Agreement, this one is monumental. We have built a program to help the city communities affected 50% beneath the poverty level and try to target these communities to build an entry program for people just like me and many of you on this call, right? Through ARC, we can do this. Through ARC is our access point to going through the pre-apprenticeship program. I've been in the industry for 20 years now, 22 years. I came in as an insulator, was their organizer and the political director, and now I'm here representing the New York City building trades and over 100,000 construction members. So I'll give you a quick snapshot of the highlights, and due to COVID, things have changed and the programs have been affected by COVID as well. So these highlights are of 2019 impact for the ARC collective, and Kathleen has these numbers, we've utilized these before, is there's this interest about 5,000 New York City residents that have shown interest. Over 632 people have been trained, over 500 people have entered the program and been placed into an apprenticeship program. Now, once you're in an apprenticeship program, that's your pathway straight into, you're a union member as an apprentice, right? 76% of the programs are city residents. So it's good to see that we are working together. We are working in this, and to understand the importance of government and city council member and state senators and assembly members to keep promoting access and unionized construction, or the green economy, right? The unionized green economy, because that allows us to enter more people and grow our pool. So with that, Kerry, I know I'm on a time limit, so I don't want to take up too much time, but I'm here for any questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we don't want to cut you off either, because I'm sure everyone's loving hearing from you. There's been some chatter in the chat. Kathleen, was there something, a theme coming up there that you wanted to raise?
Yeah, just before we move on, I just wanted to, of course, thank both Jeff and Santos. Great to hear about access and opportunity, and that's what the audience is here is so interested in, and that's part of why we're here. So the questions quickly is, in this moment of crossroads, but also moment of opportunity, what should workforce development providers do to be best prepared? In a couple of words.
So for the industry itself, I think at a minimum is trying to have a high school diploma or a GED, right? These are this is a minimum, right? Obviously, being drug-free, there is drug testing. Although marijuana is now legal in New Jersey and a little bit further north than us, it's still in your system. Marijuana in New York State is still a drug, and even if that becomes legal, the metrics of how to measure that, you still have to be able to perform the job. And in construction, falls are the greatest threats to us, and that is the greatest cause of death in construction. So those are just three of the most minimal things that one should be prepared for.
Great, thank you, Santos. There's a lot more in the chat, but there's also a lot that we'll still put in the chat in terms of answers to questions. The ARC does stand for Apprenticeship Readiness Collective, and so that's in the chat as well. So in addition to new, it's construction skills, pathways to apprenticeship, and helmets to hard hats. And we'll be talking a lot more about it. So again, thank you to both Jeff and Santos for being with us today and continuing with us as we continue these conversations. And it's my pleasure to turn to Jen Mitchell, who will introduce our next speaker.
Hi, everybody. Can you all hear me? Thumbs up? Okay. I'm Jennifer Mitchell. I'm the Executive Director of the HOPE program. Thrilled to be here with all of you today. It's so exciting to actually get something that we're talking about time around and start to gather. As Kerry went over the 5 I's in the beginning, we are in the gate phase. But we also figured it would be great to have some actionable items. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Amy Peterson, who leads the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development. I'm going to put Amy's full bio in the chat, but Santos referred to the Build It Back program. Amy was the lead on the Mayor's Office of Housing Recovery and Build It Back prior to her work in the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development now. She also was the president of Non-Traditional Employment Opportunities for Women. She is a great thought partner, has a lot of expertise in workforce development. And so without further ado, here's Amy for something we can all do today.
Hi all. So I imagine I don't have a huge amount of time. And I'm going to talk to you about community hiring and about how we can all work together. And I'll just say that I'm so grateful for the organizations that are putting this on, because I've had numerous conversations over the last couple of weeks about how do we put a framework in place to connect if we have an opportunity to do a climate core, which people are talking about at every level, or other things. And it's like, if only we had a network. So the idea that we're now building this green sector network is really exciting. And I've had people say that to me. So I'm gonna see if I can share my screen, although I have to actually push the screen. And just very quickly talk to you about the new legislation that the state that we are putting forth at the state level. And this would allow us to do what we did on Build It Back across all of our programs. And so what is quite annoying is that the city spends money, lots of money, billions of dollars, right? But because of state law and the US Constitution, whenever you say, I want to do local hire, the answer is always no. And so we figured out ways to do it. We did it on the Sandy Build It Back work. It's a little bit easier after disaster to use some language and contracts. We had the federal funding, which has Section 3 and Executive Order 11246 and other stuff, but we couldn't do it. Santos talked a bit about the PLA, the project labor agreement we've just agreed to with the city, between the city and the building trades, where the unions have stepped up and said, we will prioritize the hiring of New Yorkers from low income communities on work that the city is doing, and we will make sure that apprentices are doing that work too, and we'll partner with the organizations that are part of the Apprentice Readiness Collective to bring people into the trades. But that is being done only because the unions committed to it and talked about it, and we'd built up this process over a long period of time, a network really. And so if we want to have this impact on other funding that we're spending, so all of the building retrofit work that isn't part of a project labor agreement, any work that is tied to heat pump installations, and a lot of things that people talk about, any work that is kind of part of this larger green network, we really need to be able to get past the state issue. And so just as the state allows for minority women businesses, we want to make sure that state general municipal law allows for us to say, we want to hire low income New Yorkers to do this work. And most importantly, and I'm not going to go through the details of this because I imagine hopefully some of you have heard about this before, and we can do a much longer presentation, and we're really trying to get people to sign on and support this right now. But the idea would be that anybody who does business with the city, either through a procurement, but also all of the franchises and concessions and grants and loans we have, that we would establish rules that would require low-income New Yorkers or New Yorkers from low-income zip codes and NYCHA residents to be offered jobs in relation to this work. And that is incredibly important for us to really be able to realize what we're looking at. We have so many great workforce programs, but if they're not directly connected to the jobs, it doesn't really work. And so what I'm hoping that we all can think about and build out is, just as we've built out this kind of network for the project labor agreements jobs from kind of community-based organizations, connect to the pre-apprenticeship programs, connect to the apprenticeship programs and the jobs through Workforce One, I might add. We would like to figure that out for all of the other types of ways the city spends money, especially related to green jobs. And I know I saw Stacks and Jules is on here, and other organizations that are like looking at different pieces of building maintenance and technology and different ways that that the city is addressing climate, and the ways that we spend money. We really want to figure out how to make those connections. So what we're hoping to do is work with you all on kind of figuring it out, setting up those networks, and then really holding employers accountable for offering jobs to the people that you all serve.
Great. Thank you, Amy. So we're planning on a breakout, but based on the time, I don't think it makes sense to break us out. We'll lose time putting you in and getting you back. So let's have some conversation now, and we could do it in the chat and lift up what you put in there, or please feel free to unmute yourself. We really want to create an environment for a conversation. Thinking about everything you heard, our breakout time is really going to focus on the process of building partnerships. So you've heard a lot about data and different opportunities in the city and different considerations that this city is taking on, from community hiring and what's going on in the trades and new investments and projects. And I also want to point out that with a Biden administration and knowing his agenda around the green economy, that means something different for this work. There will be investments in the green economy, in the support for the retrofits and new projects. And oh, I just got distracted by your baby, Jeff. That's horrible. Sorry. And so let's think about what we need to know. And please just open your mics and feel free to speak out, step in, flow in to the conversation, and let's generate a few questions that we could even bring back to the data experts that we had here today to dig a little deeper.
Hi, this is Catherine from Cypress Hills. I wanted to put a little input. I love everything Amy was saying in the sense of, because I feel like we've been talking about green construction. If we actually hire locally, that's kind of supporting the same thing. If they're local, you're going to end up, walking to work instead of having to drive or bike. And I think there also needs to be a focus on being able to use the local businesses that are in the area and contracting locally, so that you're reducing the amount of gas and things that are used. So if we're investing more in that, I feel like that could really help out. And it's like, it seems a little frustrating that the state doesn't really want to prioritize it, and it's like the unions being able to only. I think it should be a combination of both, because once you make it a requirement, that's when things are actually done. Like one of the things, I'm gonna try to be really fast. One of the things I've seen a lot in our neighborhood is that there's a lot of development going up in East New York, and all these contractors, when they go to, all these developers, when they go to community board, they're like, we're gonna hire local, we're gonna do this, and there's no accountability. And I think the thing that gets frustrating is that there's Workforce One that's supposed to be, I think, counting this and stuff, but you're talking about one system for the entire city. So I think there needs to be we need to work on a system where individual communities can help support the larger. So continuing these types of conversation and feeling like, okay, there's an easier way to facilitate and to get the information around. Done.
No need to cut yourself off, but thank you. And any other last comments from the group? I want to quickly note that my colleague Amanda put in the chat a link to the feedback form. And it's really important that we hear from you and in this feedback, because as we're designing these meetings, we know it's important to bring you this information that you're hearing and the different resources But we also do know it's important to get you all talking as a network and get kind of to that like design table where we're thinking about how can we build a citywide network together and what it looks like. So if you could, get to that feedback form and fill that in. Anyone want to chime in with another comment before I switch to last steps? Yes, please, go ahead.
Hey, Carrie, so I found something very interesting today. I learned today was I loved how it was put together and spoken to, was the concept of creating careers around technology and having journey people develop these skill sets that they can then grow as careers move forward, right? And it really hit home with that because the work that we do and the Clean Energy Academy trainings that we run is with that type of emphasis of what Wayne Gretzky said, right? And how he became great. And so he says, like, instead of chasing the puck as everyone else was doing, he was always where the puck will be. And this conversation really kind of alluded to that for me. It was the understanding where the puck is going, so that way we could prepare our participants and the individuals that will take the lead on this, be prepared for what's coming, not necessarily exactly what's here, and where, again, the pie is much smaller and much higher competition and many more barriers to entry. So overall, I really think that, what's happening here, bringing us all together, and also sharing all these resources, all these efforts, I think is going to be, something that's going to be crucial to moving forward this clean energy economy that we're living in. So thank you for making this happen.
Thank you, Alejandro. It's great to see you. And that's such a good point. I love the Wayne Gretzky analogy. I think you raised something that is another set of data that we will bring to the table too. And it's what are the skills, right? It's not just about training for a job, but it's what are the skills that are in demand right now. We know, the pandemic and automation has accelerated. The pandemic has accelerated automation, and there's a whole new set of skills regardless of the job. And what does that mean? I want to just, before people sign off here, I want to let you know that we have the next meeting is set for January 7th at 10 a.m. And we're going to set these meetings monthly for the first Thursday of the month at 10 a.m. Calendar invites or email reminders will go out, and we will share the recording of this. There's things in the public agenda that you have access to, the participant agenda. A column was added for you to put your email addresses. I also have those from registration, so we could generate a contact list, and I love that was asked for. That means the network is building and happening. So look for those things and follow up, and please, share your input. It's very important for us designing and tailoring these meetings to your needs as well. So I thank you. If any of my co-hosts, Jen, Lisbeth, Tanya, Kathleen, my colleagues, have any final words?
Great conversation, everyone. We look forward to the next one. Be well.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having us.
Happy holidays. See you all in January. Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Wear a mask.